In this video, more literacy of the NES. Hey everyone, John here. It's time for another book review. Because I believe there should be more written about the history of video games, I've contributed to a few Kickstarter campaigns for video game-based books. These include most of the books in the Visual Compendium series by Bitmap Books, based in the United Kingdom. This series includes books featuring the Commodore 64, the Commodore Amiga, the Sinclair ZX Spectrum, and the Nintendo Entertainment System and Famicom, which we'll be looking at right now. So this is the Unofficial NES Famicom, a Visual Compendium. 536 pages, available in softcover or hardcover, and comes in a protective board slipcase, which has a lenticular fascia. As with the other books in the series, the main content consists of screenshots, typically with one per game laid out over a 2-page spread with some text, usually a few paragraphs about the game written by a fan, a game reviewer or journalist, or game designer or artist. 170 officially released games from the library are featured, including not just North American and European NES games, but some Japanese Famicom games as well. While that is far from the complete 8-bit Nintendo library, this wasn't meant to be an exhaustively comprehensive book. Yet from what is selected, any gamer from that era is likely to recognize many of the screenshots from the iconic games that are chosen. You pretty much can't have a book about the NES without featuring Super Mario Bros., The Legend of Zelda, Mega Man, Castlevania, Ninja Gaiden, and the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Speaking of which, a few deserving games get more than just one screenshot on 2 pages, such as Battletoads, with twice as much coverage, and 8 games, including favorites such as Mike Tyson's Punch-Out!, Contra, and Batman, also get these gatefold pages, which open up for a larger scene or map. Why hello there, VG Maps. There's a very brief section on 8 homebrew games, including Battle Kid and Somari, and the book ends with a section on 6 unreleased games. And it's not just about the software, the book also features hardware photography. You get glamour shots of the Famicom, the NES, even the underutilized but somehow iconic accessories of Rob, R.O.B., and the Power Glove. Also, there are some profiles on some of the companies involved with the NES, including Nintendo themselves, Capcom, Konami, Namco, and Rare. There are also a handful of in-depth interviews with some industry insiders, including Tim Gervin, who designed the branding and packaging of the NES, David Darling, the creator of the Game Genie cheat device, as well as Tom Dubois, Konami's box artist. Speaking of box art, there is also a section featuring a few examples of the covers for NES and Famicom games, with interesting discussion about it all, as this was before the days of pre-rendered covers using in-game assets. There are anime-style boxes, there are some trying to be more realistic, some that give you a clear idea about what the game is like, and some that are a bit more vague. It's a nice section that also features a 2-page spread on the 18 launch titles with their classic black box design. Besides box art, there are also some examples of fan art, featuring characters and settings from NES games. And I absolutely have to mention the section on fan memories. During the Kickstarter campaign, I had submitted a paragraph recalling to the events leading up to the purchase of this NES, hoping my story would be published. It was not a reward listed based on my Kickstarter pledge, so there was no guarantee that of the 4,129 backers that mine would be among the 30 that would be chosen. And then I'd completely forgotten that I'd written that. So imagine my surprise when I was reading this late at night to suddenly see my name in my own NES story at the end of the first page of Fan Memories. So you can probably guess that I like this book, but it's not a perfect book, so let's get the not so good stuff out of the way first. The biggest problem I have are the odd moments that take us out of the NES era. Firstly, the company profiles that mention post-NES and current day projects. For example, the end of the profile on Rare mentions that they are currently at work on Sea of Thieves, an Xbox One game slated for a 2018 release. I found this very jarring. I think it was okay to touch on a few of their works after the NES era, such as the Donkey Kong Country games and GoldenEye 007, as those made a name for Rare, especially outside of Europe. Plus, those examples are in the past. But to mention a current generation game like Sea of Thieves that is still in development will instantly make this book seem dated once that game is released. It now feels like a retrospective book meant for this year, as opposed to being a timeless record of 8-bit Nintendo. Secondly, with regard to this book's place in time, there's the fan art. Please note, I am not criticizing any of the works artistically. In fact, I think every one of them is great. I just really question the inclusion of certain pieces in a book about the NES. Some of these characters look quite different in later games. While these are still NES characters, they just aren't in their NES designs, and therefore takes away from the intention of this being a book about the NES era specifically. Those are my harshest criticisms. But I'm also not sure if I like the randomness of this book's layout, as the photos, interviews, profiles, and art are interspersed within the main section with screenshots, without any obvious logic as to their placement. While this may break up the initial read-through, it's harder to go back to refer to something specific, always having to rely on the table of contents. And there's some seemingly inconsistent localization. Now this is a European-made book, so of course there are mentions of football with what we North Americans call soccer. That's just a cultural thing. But while it's no surprise that it uses the name The New Zealand Story, which North Americans know of as Kiwi Craze, it then refers to Contra, even though that was called Probotector in Europe. They're the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, as they are called in this book, but they were called the Teenage Mutant Hero Turtles in Europe. Call things whatever, but shouldn't it be consistently one or the other? Okay, enough complaining, now onto the good stuff. The main section is awesome. Great choice of games here. Despite featuring only a fraction of the NES and Famicom library, I don't recall thinking that anything was critically missing. And the screenshots were just as thoughtfully selected. I don't think I once questioned the choices made here. Since the games are listed in chronological order, a flip-through makes for an interesting glimpse at the evolution of NES games. And though I criticized their placement earlier, all the other stuff, photos, art, interviews, etc., do make for a well-rounded NES overview. On a personal level, my story's in here, my name's in the Kickstarter thanks section, and my website, vgmaps.com, is mentioned at the end of the book for the use of some maps. Ultimately, it makes a great coffee table book and reference for any retro gamer, and while the unofficial NES Famicom, a Visual Compendium, is not as comprehensive as, say, the Ultimate Nintendo Guide to the NES Library, which I reviewed earlier, it certainly feels more concise, casual, and not so heavy, both in physical weight and the amount of text. But while I'm comparing it to other books, it does have more text than previous books in the series, which I consider an improvement, but it was also necessary for this to be published at all. Because, and this is a weird aside, but I do know there are some people who only heard of this book when Nintendo took notice, with concerns about copyright infringement, and the Kickstarter campaign got suspended temporarily right near the end. What some of these people may not know is that those issues were cleared up, and increasing the amount of text was one of the resolutions. And since I have just reviewed this, you can see that the book is very obviously published and available. So therefore, I say if you like the NES at all, you should definitely buy a copy. Recommended, with a 4.5 out of 5. Thanks for checking out my review. If you like this, please hit the like button and share and subscribe. And if you really are a fan of the NES, I only have a handful of these NES box art posters left, so let me know if you're interested in buying one, as I won't be printing these anymore. Also, I'm selling DVDs of Nintendo Quest, a documentary about one man trying to collect every NES game within a month, but without online purchases. So he travels across Ontario, Canada, and the United States in this fun and fascinating quest. This is the exclusive Kickstarter backer version with an audio commentary not found elsewhere, so follow the link in the description below if you are interested. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you later.